so I think we need to just press ahead.
All right. Well, I pulled rank because I want to do the introduction.
Very good.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you someone who I've learned to trust as a mentor and I think friend as we've gone through the years. Eric, Dr. Eric has been Jill and my chiropractor, health coach, food guider, and all these other things for 3-4 years now, I think. Something like that. 3.5 years?
Yeah, thank you. I'm 5 years.
Oh, there you go. But those of you who know Jill and me know that we've lost quite a bit of weight over the last couple of years. And I'll admit, when I first started going to Dr. Eric, I was hesitant of chiropractic care because our experience had not been well. I was overweight and knew it, as Jill knew. We were not eating well, didn't kind of know how to get going. A yard project for me would be a 4 to 8 Advil day to get through it. I was on reflux meds daily, had been for over 12 years. And all these other things that doctors kept prescribing. And just by listening to an educated man who knows what he's talking about, and I'll say brilliant man, who understands and does all the research on these things, we began taking classes and learning, wow, there's a much healthier way to live. And from the perspective I have in faith, this is a God factor. Because God wants our lives to be blessed, and therefore He wants them to be healthy. And the healthier we are, the more able we are to not only serve God and enjoy life. I like being in my 60s and not afraid of going to a place like Haiti, because I'm knowing that my body's going to handle that. And I'm not going to get sick. I'm not going to have to worry about stuff because I know what I'm dealing with. I know what I have to be cautious about. And I know what I don't have to be cautious about. Major part of all of that, and certainly the diet that we eat now, the exercise we do, and everything else is a direct result of God using Dr. Eric to guide us in the way we need to go. So I couldn't be more thrilled that he's back. And I say back because I've already hosted a pastor's program here for Dr. Eric to come and teach the pastors of this county here in the very spaces you're at how to be healthy. And so I know you're going to be blessed this morning. I know you believe what he's saying. He not only teaches it, he lives it. And we like that when people do that. So I'd like to open in prayer. And we're going to wait just a moment because we've got a few more folks coming in. Let's get them settled. Welcome back. For Saturday morning, good turnout.
Well, you got students over here.
I've got students. Watch it, because the questions they ask might stump you. Go, please. Jonathan, stump him with some profound, like you do with me on Saturday morning, some question I go, top of the morning to you. I just introduced Dr. Eric as one of my trusted mentors, life coaches, I would say. Yes, he's hosted pastor conference. I've hosted pastor conferences here for him, and really privileged to have you here. Jill and I are not going. I'm going to be going to join Jill because our out-of-state guests are arriving, and I have a honey-do list, including going shopping, which for those of you who know me know this is way outside my box. I've got my list. I'm going to go do that, but I could not pass up this moment. Let's bow our heads and pray. Father, we thank you for the privilege at this time, and we thank you that you consistently bring into our lives those who help us to live a holy life of health and righteousness set apart for your purposes. We thank you for the education, the experience, the wisdom, and the grace, and the faith that Eric brings to us this day. And we pray your fresh blessing upon him. Lord, we know we could not afford to bring him, so we are especially grateful that you have called him to volunteer to be with us today. May his family be blessed. And may we all grow in understanding what it is to be on this holy journey in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Bless you. Thanks. Did that come up? No. All right. I've got a coach. So
We all need coaches.
As much as I can potentially be your coach, I've been coached as well.
F5?
Yeah, I F5'd it, and then forward air, Space bar, perhaps? Oh, we, sorry. Maybe we should stay here?
Okay, a quick story. I'm teaching 23 students in Haiti, and their big agony is, what do we do at baptisms? I said, what do you mean? What if there's no water? I said, what do you mean you always have water? I said, what do you mean? And I went, I didn't know how to say it in Creole, so I just broke up into complete hysterics. They knew I was joking. So.
I've been blessed. Holy blessed right there. All right, so, and I'm very grateful for Pastor Fred's his gracious introduction. It has been my pleasure to serve not only Fred and Jill and others. I've got his kids, some of his kids who spend time in my office as well. But then, of course, people who are here in your congregation, and my children came to school here before now attending Church Christian. So we've been fortunate to be involved in the church. So today I have a plan for you, and it's not to scare you. Have you read the purple sheet yet? Has anyone read it? Yeah. So if you are in fear in this moment, please let's back up a little bit and let's not get scared right away. So sometimes when we start to introduce some of the steps that I'm going to talk about, or some of the education that I'll give, we start to get nervous and fearful of what are we being asked to do? What does this look like? Oh my goodness, I'll never eat another tasty meal again. How could I live this way? So who doesn't have a purple sheet that would like to have one? Okay, we got a couple of those. So it just it gives us a little bit of where we're going to start today. And as you see on the screen, the term 60-day turnaround, that is what I teach. This is a program that I developed that has no book currently. So I utilize a different book that I teach from as a guide. I've been working on the book for a while now, and so hopefully it'll be done sometime this year, that guides along the 60-day turnaround. So my goal today is to give you the basis of understanding that we utilize in the 60-day. Now the thing is, it's a 60-day for a reason. I used to always teach 40-day because of that biblical reference of 40 days. Everything was 40 days. At the end of 40 days, though, I always had a ton of people say, I still don't know what exactly to do. Like, I kind of get it, and there's these rules, but what is the spirit of the rule? How do I do this without just adhering to rules? So we said, you know what, we need to add 20 more days on. We need more time so that A, we can teach more, and B, people can have more time committed to a certain process, to have more life change, more lifestyle change, meaning lasting changes. So typically when we talk diet, most people think about diets as weight loss. I don't look at what we do as weight loss. It happens for many people, absolutely. For some people, weight gain happens because that's what they need. For others, nothing happens. They just stay flatlined. And that's okay if we're changing the internal environment that relates to overall health. And that's our goal. Our goal is healthy people. So weight loss, weight gain, stay the same, whatever it may be, the goal from a nutritional standpoint that I have is that we're helping to build greater health. From a biblical perspective, how are we going to build greater health? And so it was great. Pastor Fred kind of shared his testimony. And he's no longer on those medications. He doesn't take those in. He's healthy. The internal environment has improved. And I believe that's entirely due to a combination of chiropractic and diet. And today's discussion will be diet. All right. So, see, this, I believe we're going to have a slow, from what I understand from our test run, it's going to be slow to move forward. So when I push the arrow button, I'm not going to get jumpy and concerned. We're going to think it's Did you move it forward or did I move it forward? Yeah, you did. So it's gonna look like this. I'm gonna go over here and push it, and then he's gonna see that, and he's gonna make it go forward. That's probably what's gonna happen. But that's gonna work. So before we get into talking about anything else, I want to talk about the urgency to change. So just for a show of hands, who would think that the health care or the health of Americans is extremely high? That we're just really, really healthy individuals here. Okay, so yeah, laughter. So no one believes that we're just the healthiest place on earth, right? We don't really have a whole lot of that. It's an interesting thing because if we look at where we fall, there was a study. Now, the World Health Organization keeps stats, WHO.org. They keep stats on at any point in time between 190 and 200 countries where they have data coming back on health in those countries. So if we look at that data, it's pretty shocking at times. A few years back, a group of authors, they wrote an article in Discover magazine. It was actually in 2007, so it's more than a few years now. But I love the perspective that they took. They said, we want to actually measure health. And health is pretty ambiguous, right? Like, how do you measure health? Are you healthy? Yeah, I'm healthy. And then tomorrow you're diagnosed with cancer. Oh, well, maybe I wasn't healthy, right? Because that's a disease that you can't feel. There's no awareness. So we realized it's really hard to get a true measure of health. How do you know? How do you know? So what they did, they took 3 measures. They took longevity, infant mortality, which is how many children live for the first 12 months of life, and then quality years of life, which really is a measure of how long you can take care of yourself. And so they took those 3 and they looked at the rankings in all of these countries. At the time it was 191 nations that they were ranking. And they found that where we fell when they combined the ranking of those 3 things, we were 72 out of 191 nations, which is not very good. Especially considering we are spending more money on what we term healthcare than any other country in the world. So much so that we are roughly $3,000 per person per year more than the second country. And our total is right around $8,300. So $3,000 is a huge percentage. And that's how much more we spend than nation number 2 spends per person per year on health care. You'll see I do this a lot when I say health care. I put quotes around it because I really don't believe that what we do is truly health care. It's more disease mongering, illness management, symptom treatment. That's our focus. Drug until the drug fails, then cut. It's kind of where we go with our health care, right? That's what it is. So I see that as an issue. That's a problem. I think it's a mess. We have just a mess here. The stats. In cardiovascular disease, 1 in 3 suffer from some form of heart disease. The American Academy of Pediatrics okayed statin drugs for the use in children. That's interesting. High cholesterol, who wants to give you a statin drug? That's according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's okay to do that. The first statin drug came on the market in 1987. It's called Mevacor. That was the very first one. Lipitor wasn't the first one. It's just the biggest one. Mevacor came in 87. Heart disease has done nothing but increase every year since 1987. So tell me, is cholesterol-lowering meds, are they the answer to reducing heart disease in our country? It doesn't seem to be the case, does it? So at this point in time, for 8-year-olds is what they okay for. 1 in 3 will have diabetes by 2050 at our current rate. And diabetes, when we talk diabetes, what we're referring to is highly type 2 diabetes. It used to be called adult onset diabetes, but it is no longer called that. They removed that label because it happens in children. And type 2 diabetes means acquired due to lifestyle. Type 1 is a lack of ability for the pancreas to produce insulin. Completely different disease. Just because the name diabetes exists, all it means is that we have a sugar regulation issue. But they're completely different. One is due to resistance of a cell, and I'm going to talk about that in a decent amount today. And the other one's due to a lack of ability to produce the insulin. So we want to understand those. 875,000 heart disease deaths per year. 1 out of every 2.5 people in our country die from heart disease. Back 16 years ago, there was a study that was done, and there's a Johns Hopkins spokesperson who referenced this study. When they said that, they felt that cardiovascular disease was the most easily preventable disease that kills. Yet it is the #1 disease killer of all the diseases. And they called it the most easily to prevent. And they said it because their research review said that stress, diet, and exercise were the leading risk factors of heart disease. So it's kind of a big deal when you think about who's responsible for whether you have stress, good diet, and exercise. All of a sudden it's back in our laps. And a lot of times people don't like to hear that. It's an easier story to say, well, it's not your fault, there's a genetic thing, your mom, she did it to you. I'm sorry, it's all her fault. And that's easier to say It's not uncomfortable. Well, it might be uncomfortable for when the mom's in the room, right? But it's not as uncomfortable as saying, oh, it's highly preventable. I'm responsible. Like, don't tell me that. I don't want to know that. I don't want to be responsible for this. You know, I tell people that I look at kind of the listing of importance. You know, what's the most important thing in my life? Well, from my heart, I'll tell you, God, my wife, my kids. I'm going to kind of go down that list, right? My brain always attaches health right to it. And I've taken care of, I've had the privilege, or perhaps not the privilege at all, to be the consulting doctor in about 400 cancer cases now. Meaning, you know, we sit, we talk, we work through, we do this effort. And most people will choose to utilize a doctor like myself for cancer because they've already failed in the medical model. So it's not really a privilege, it's kind of sad, because I've had a lot of people who I've become close with die. And what that's taught me is the importance of health being right in the middle of everything. You know, for me, it's one of the things I always have to try to make sure I keep it right where it belongs, though. It's a focus, but it's a focus because it's a path to something else. I don't want it to become my idol. But I know that my health is a path, an opportunity for me to be a servant in ways that many people can't be, because I maintain good health. If I can maintain it for life and serve to the moment I die, that last breath, and that to me is me, you know, putting health on the board. So, cancer. So there we are. Cancer is a tough one to talk about. 1 in 3 women will have cancer. 1 in 2 men will have cancer. Interesting. More men will end up with cancer than women. Heart disease tends to be the other way around. I'm sure you've heard that stat before. 590,000 deaths per year, 1 in 3. You know, when you consider 1 out of every 2.5 people die from heart disease, 1 in every 3 people die from cancer. If you take 6 people, and you do the math, that's 5 out of 6 will die from those 2 diseases. That's a big deal. It's a really big deal. So, is diet related? Is nutrition related? I believe absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. There have been more studies now that have correlated toxicities with cancers, with obesity with cancer, with sluggish insulin responsiveness with cancer, not just diabetes. So we are now starting to see the correlations that suggest that, hey, all of these things have a relationship. And so, and I bring those out because, you know, you can't look at someone and you can't know. It has nothing to do with just what you see. It's not the book and the cover. There's a lot to do with what's on the inside. And that's something that, you know, we sadly don't get a good measure of. Well, let's, yes. So, you know, the solution here, and yes again. So the U.S. population is 95% of the world, and then we're 5%. So we're the world's population, we're 5% of the world's population. So as we bring up the next click on that slide, we can see the, why are you not filling that? Go back there. Huh, we've lost color on that, that's funny. So what that pie would be showing is a 75-25 split. My point is that we are 5% of the world's population. We take 75% of the world's medication. So really quick here, who in the room, who has a goal or an aspiration to be on more drugs? No? No? Yeah. Okay, that's a dumb question, right? Yeah. Now, if this was a different group meeting, there might be more hands up, right? No, but the reality is, you know, how many thousands of people do you have to get to someone who actually their health plan is medication? Right? I mean, it's kind of dumb sounding. Like, no one has a health plan that's medication. I just want to take as many drugs as I can. That's my goal. Right? Nobody has that health plan. And the thing is, too, even someone who ends up in that situation, I had a patient once who came in to my office with their file, and she had 38 meds listed that she was taking every single day, 38 separate medications. It worked out, we figured out it was about 90 pills a day that she was consuming. 90 pills a day. So is that healthy? Yeah, so when you picture a healthy person in your mind, you don't picture that person, right? So how does someone get there? Well, hers was an interesting story because she had a very healthy appearing life. 8 years earlier, she had run 2 marathons that year without training. In other words, she was intensely fit, no doubt about that. She had an incredible appearance of health. I mean, you would have thought, wow, that's a healthy person, for sure. And it all started with a little heart thing. And the heart thing turned into a moment of fear. And that's where all of this goes from, all this comes from, all this starts from. It's a moment of fear. Because see, as all of you, failed to put your hand up when it came to goals or aspirations of taking meds, right? No one had that goal. But it's very unlikely that any of you have a daily goal that you'll never take a med, that you'll never need it. And that's the difference. The dichotomy is there. See, because what we typically do is we walk through life unintentionally, right? We just kind of go through and we're just doing life. And culture is an incredible pressure all around us to make choices that are fast choices. And fast choices aren't always the best choices. In most cases, they're not. From a food choice, they're not. From a solution to a symptom choice, they're not. We find ourselves in that world. And then just like that, now we're caught in the spiral. And so let's move a little bit further away from the cultural decision, just like we do in our faith. Right? We move away from culture when it comes to faith. We should when it comes to our diet. Do that. So, go ahead, let's see this next one. So when it comes to disease and attaching, how do we get diet and disease and where's the big relationship? What we found over the years and what research has shown over the years is the greatest relationship that you can see is inflammation. So every disease process, every chronic disease, every acute disease has some sort of inflammatory component to it. Every single one of them does. So it's really interesting. Cancer. Have you ever had anyone say, oh, that's a precancerous cell? So a precancerous cell is that beginning of mutation and very commonly associated with irritation. Something irritates that cell first. So irritation could come from perhaps excessive sun. Have you heard of the untreated reflux will become cancer concern? Doctors will often say that. Well, if you have reflux, you don't treat it, it's going to become cancer. Because that acid is going to cause a change, dysplasia we call it, in the cells that are in the esophagus. And then over time, that precancerous state becomes cancerous because of irritation. That's inflammation of a vessel there. That first one, we're looking at the normal artery at the very top there, and you can see that pinkish space in the picture, the cross-section on the right, is the open vessel. The dark red around it would be the vessel wall, and that's designed to be an artery there. So a thick vessel wall, arteries have muscular walls, where veins have thin walls because there's no contraction in the vein. But in an artery you have contraction, so it's a thick wall. Well, if you inflame that thick wall, that second one shows a significant amount of inflammation where the wall has encroached upon the space. You can see there's very little space now for blood to pass through. That's an inflammatory response. So a lot of times, when we look at foods, if we actually dig in and look at the food, we can say, oh, there's an inflammatory response to that food. Some of you know of those in the form of allergies, right? So you have an allergic reaction to something. That's an inflammatory response. And that inflammatory response, you'll typically notice it happening in something that's going to have an immediate impact on what you feel, which would be bronchioles for most people. If you have a serious allergy, all of a sudden you feel like the airways are closing up, you can't breathe, and there is that allergic response. Well, it doesn't just happen in your bronchioles. It doesn't just happen in the lungs. It happens in the whole body. So what if it's a mild inflammatory response, one that doesn't give you feedback in the form of breathing, or tongue swelling, or hives? What if it's just a mild level of inflammation, where there's no feedback whatsoever? Now what happens? That happens. The increase in inflammation in the vascular system happens, and you won't notice that. So there's these two compounds that we've seen, homocysteine and C-reactive protein, which are measurable. You can do a blood test and get your homocysteine and your C-reactive protein, and those are really good indicators of inflammatory states in the vascular system. And what's really cool is that if you understand the homocysteine and C-reactive protein levels, you can understand whether or not cholesterol actually is going to be a concern in somebody or not. So there's some great books out there called the Cholesterol Conspiracy, or the Cholesterol, oh man, I just lost the name of the other one. Anyways, there's a bunch of books on this that will talk about how cholesterol itself is not the thing to treat. And I believe 100% that it is not the thing to treat. That high cholesterol is not your concern. But rather, the inflammatory side is. Because if your cholesterol is not oxidized, meaning it doesn't have anything that allows it to stick to something, then you could have 400 cholesterol, and your risk is the same if you have 100 cholesterol. Whereas if it is oxidized, if you have 100, 80, 200, I don't care. You are most definitely going to have a problem with your cholesterol. And what oxidizes it are inflammatory food molecules. So the last one there shows the no blood flow, the fully occluded artery, and we can see there inflammation and scarring. And you can't, it's hard with the lighting in here to see scarring, but it shows us a change in coloration. You get tissue that is no longer just inflamed. There's one resolution for inflammation in the body, and it's scar tissue. So it either leaves or it scars. Inflammation in the body will leave, or if it stays, it scars. That's the only resolution for inflammation that's chronic in a body, is scar tissue. Once scar tissue exists, it always exists. So can we still reduce some of the inflammation in that vessel and change that? Yeah, absolutely, we could. But it'll still have scarring. There'll still be some level of occlusion. You'll still have, maybe it's only 80% block versus 100% block, as it shows right there. So complete reversal of that, removal of that scar tissue, requires either divine intervention or surgical intervention. And people tend to pursue the surgical route more often than the divine route in our country, right? That's the way we do it. We go to the surgical route. So if I live a lifestyle that has created inflammation and scarring in a vessel, I don't care which one, pick one. Maybe it's my carotid, perhaps it's femoral. And if I have it bypassed, and I continue on the lifestyle that creates inflammation and scarring, what's going to happen to my new bypassed vessel? It's going to inflame and scar. And do you think it's likely that I have other inflamed and scarred vessels in my body? So interesting research out there will show you that a bypass of any part of the body does not increase longevity by any amount at all. It only increases momentary function. So you can feel a difference. If you have poor blood flow to your brain because of 2 clogged carotids, and if you bypass those, put new ones in, pig artery, who knows what, right? Take one, borrow a vessel from somewhere else. You're going to have an immediate change because now you have greater blood flow to the brain. So you're going to feel better right away. But in your body, I guarantee you have clots or a thrombus that will become an embolus. They're there. They're just elsewhere. And at some point, they'll break free, and they're going to get caught in some other artery, whether it be brain, heart. So our job isn't just to bypass and not worry about our lifestyle. Our job is to change the lifestyle that created the need for the bypass. All right, let's see what our next slide tells us. Yeah, so in nutrients, so let me just go through the 60-day turnaround thing that I teach. And I'm going to give you a little understanding of kind of what our goal is in this. And we'll talk a little bit more about some specifics as we go, but that'll give us a basis to kind of push forward. So, 60 days, and what I gave you is a set of rules, and I didn't give you all of the rules. I hate rules personally. Does anyone else hate rules? I don't like rules. It's like legalism. I don't want that. I want grace. Give me something else. Give me something cool. But rules, they kind of work to help us just get, okay, well, this is the path I need to be on. So what I do in this 60-day turnaround is I give everyone a set of, hey, these are the rules, but by the time we're done, I want you to understand the spirit of the rules. Because I don't want you to have to live under rules. I want you to understand why the rules exist, and then you can figure out kind of how your lifestyle should go from here. Because I don't want to have strict living. I want to have smart living, right? You understand that, the difference between those? So, but it requires knowledge, and it requires you to have knowledge. You really can't just rely on me, because then you never know. You walk into a grocery store and you look at something and you say, well, where's Dr. Eric? Right? I don't know what to do with this. So if we take you to a place where now you have that knowledge, well, now it's different. Now you can assess anything and everything. Right now, so I'm 7, so the 60 days is pretty strict, and I'm at week 7 right now into it myself, so I'm about to be done. And then I go on fall break. You know, I love fall break. Cherokee County's so cool, fall break. So I'm going to go on fall break, and I'm going to be off of it for fall break. And what does that mean? Well, I go to Hilton Head every year for fall break, and there's a fudge shop that I really want to go to. So, right? So it doesn't mean that life is now ended because I started the 60-day thing, now life is over. No. Now I guarantee you, I'm going to feel awful when I go have that fudge, because right now I've been clean, completely clean, for 7 weeks. So it's going to be like, and I know that probably within the moment it hits my tongue. So you have this thing called salivary amylase. It breaks down carbohydrate, turns it to sugar, instantaneously when it hits your tongue. Carbohydrate. So that's why all these low-carb diets exist, because we realize, hey, if we want to change blood sugar, we can't eat carbohydrate. It's not just sugar. We have to avoid carbohydrate to lower blood sugar. And so it's going to be rough. I know it's going to be rough. But then, it's going to be okay after a few days. I'll probably have some ice cream. I'll do that too. We'll take the kids to the general store and say, okay, here you are. My kids eat really crazy well. They do. And we'll say, okay, go ahead, go crazy. And what go crazy is, it means pick 4 pieces of candy. Like, 4 pieces of bulk candy. So you get 1 Swedish fish for you. But to them, it's like awesome. Like, they feel like that's the most amazing thing. They go crazy. And now, just Swedish fish, that's awful. There's GMOs and there's colors and there's all sorts of garbage in there. But yes, I'll let them do that because God did bless us with a liver. And as long as I'm being smart in general, my liver will do its job. And that's something else I want you to know, right? How to understand that. How to understand how I could do that. Okay, well then what else should I do or not do the rest of the day because I did that? From a carbohydrate standpoint, if I eat cereal in the morning, and then I have maybe half a bagel later too, because they're tasty and they're sitting out at the teacher's lounge or who knows where. And then I have a sandwich for lunch, and then I might have a big pile of rice with some stuff for dinner. Like to understand that every bit of that grain, carbohydrate that I ate, all turned to sugar inside my body. Every bit of it turned into blood sugar. See, our issue here, and I think grains are highly biblical, but our issue is that when we get into this high carbohydrate consumption that we have in our culture, what we don't realize is that we're just becoming complete sugar addicts. Even if I didn't touch anything sweet all day long, I am succumbing to that sugar addiction of everything that turns to sugar in my bloodstream. And that's our issue. So what I have up here is nutrient density. And I love talking about this because one thing that we want to start with as we move in this direction is we want to move people into a place where we're eating more vegetables and fruits, depending. For a lot of people, I'm actually reducing their fruits. Why? Because fruit has a lot of sugar. So in our rules, you see the sugar rule. I included the sugar rule, and there's a lot more rules than what you see here. There's a link that I list, the URL. Excuse me. That gives you the rest of the rules on my website. And so you don't have to join me in our 60-day turnaround that starts September 22nd. You can do it completely on your own. That's why I have this here. So it's not you have to come to me and you got to do my thing. No, you can follow along. You can see it all. You can do it all on your own. So that's kind of neat. So, but the first thing we want to do is push more vegetables. And I use this. This comes out of Joel Fuhrman's book, Eat to Live. Joel Fuhrman is a vegetarian, and I don't eat vegetarian. I've done it at times and tested it, and I've decided that it is definitely not for me. Was Daniel a vegetarian? Maybe. Seems like he probably was a vegetarian in the king's household. But I sure know of a whole lot of other biblical stories where there was, meat being eaten. So I tend to believe that there's plenty of room to be eating meat. And for me, I definitely love it. So there we go. But it better be clean. So first, if we go to nutrients, often people say, well, if I'm eating more vegetables, and you're saying I shouldn't eat fruit besides a handful of berries every day, that's our fruit limitation when we do the 60-day turnaround, a handful of berries once a day, how am I getting enough of that nutrient that I'd be missing? Because, I've seen the emails. Like, bananas are good for the potassium. Like, I should eat bananas, right? I need that potassium. Or, I don't know, what's another one? On the fruit side, people say, you got to eat an apple a day. Keep the doctor away, of course, right? What was it? Raspberry, yeah, well, the berries were good. Yeah, so and I'm going to give you a thumbs up on all the berries. But we always have these ideas that I need those nutrients. Carrots, I take root vegetables out. Oh my goodness, yep, I take root vegetables out during the 60-day turnaround. Well, aren't carrots really good for the eyes? I mean, everyone says they're good for the eyes. I've seen the email, right? All right, so the reason why I put this up is you understand nutrient densities, because the reality is, in this much spinach, raw, piled on my hand, I've got 3 times the potassium of a banana. So, why do I need the banana? Because it tastes good. I love sugar. Let's have the banana. But that's why people, really, there's very little nutrient density in a banana. I don't know if bananas made the list. Let's see, do we find bananas on the list anywhere? I don't see them anywhere on the list. So the top, so what he did, what Joel Furman did, Dr. Joel Furman, he basically established nutrient density. So nutrient density means if I have a gram of that food, how much nutrient is in that gram? And he basically made a scale. He said, okay, the highest nutrient dense foods will be 1,000, that's their score. At the very top, kale and collards, 1,000. Most densely packed, nutrient-rich food on the planet, right there. They're number 1. Do you like them? Yeah.
With cornbread.
So it is difficult to eat a raw kale salad, right? It's hard. So there's this company that exists that made life easy for us. It's called Vitamix. They make the most incredible blender there ever was. And you can turn kale into anything you want. No, but really, slightly sauteed with some eggs for breakfast in the morning. Pretty good, I like that. Chopped thinly, added to some other spinach, romaine, something else, in a salad is really easy to eat, actually. It's not so bad. Thick leaf, good luck. You'll chew for days. Bok choy, 824. Most people don't know what bok choy is until I mention it. It looks kind of like a turnip. It's a fatter looking thing. Chop it up, saute it. It's very common in Oriental prepared dishes. Red pepper is down there. You see the spinach, cabbage. Red pepper is there at 420. Notice so that in cabbage at 481, we're already half the nutrient density of where kale and collards were. So it drops pretty fast. Those two, I tell everyone, you've got to be eating those. You have to go in that direction. When it comes to supplementation, I don't push a lot of supplementation, but I have one that I like that I've used for years now, which is called Juice Plus. Some of you probably heard of Juice Plus. But I like it for a couple of reasons. The one thing I like about it is that its primary ingredient is whole food kale. It's got it in it. And that's why I'm a big fan of it. I think it helps it really shore up our nutrients quick. So romaine lettuce, broccoli. Now, who's ever heard or said iceberg's good for nothing? Right? Iceberg lettuce, good for nothing. It's got no nutrient in it. All right, let's look down the list here. Iceberg lettuce, 110. Look what it's right above. Can you see what it's above? It's an orange. It's right above the vitamin C bomb. But it's not a vitamin C bomb. The orange growers would love for you to believe it's a vitamin C bomb. Oranges, yeah, I'm feeling sick, so I ate 12 oranges. I'm still sick. I don't know. I don't understand. Well, all the sugar you ate in your orange fed that virus, so that now you're weaker. Your vitamin C is nothing compared to what you're going to get for vitamin C up higher up that list. The red pepper will do you way better. Way better. So, see, aren't we marketed to? Isn't that what we're marketed to? And we're educated by that marketing. And then we think we have a knowledge because of marketing. I doubt there's anyone in the room here who's ever actually looked to see the comparison of vitamin C in an orange to a handful of spinach. Right? You didn't think to do that. They told me vitamin C comes from oranges, so there it is. Not so much. Not so much. If you look, this is nutrient. So nutrient is vitamin mineral content. That's what nutrient is. Macronutrients, fat, protein, carbohydrate, that's not what we're talking about here. So avocado is a healthy food to eat because of the fat and what that fat does. But there's very little nutrient in it. So if we look for avocado, it's in the middle of the second row at 64. Funny, on the nutrient side, it's tied with pineapple though. So what good is pineapple? It's flavor. I like the flavor of pineapple. I mean, it's got a good flavor. It actually has a decent amount of anti-inflammatory properties to it as well. But then you kind of have to couple it with the sugar. It makes it pretty neutral. I'm going to show you some inflammatory indices in a little bit here too. We can take a look at those. I just want to keep my watch close by. So nutrient densities are important to understand why we can eat less fruit, more vegetable, and still get what we need. Go ahead and move forward for me. So fructose. This just shows certain foods and their fructose to sucrose levels. The reason why I bring up the fructose thing is because it's important for people to understand why fructose is looked at differently than sucrose. You know, why did the corn growers of the world have to come out with these commercials trying to convince you that high fructose corn syrup was okay? You guys remember these commercials from a couple years ago? They said, it's just sugar. It's just sugar. It's just sugar. Right? Did you see those? The high fructose corn syrup people saying, you know, stop giving us a bad name. You know, high fructose corn syrup is just sugar. But it's not. See, the difference is that fructose is not removed from your body just through cells like sucrose is. So fructose has to be removed from your body via your liver. And anytime we have only one place to remove something, it's going to be slower than if we can absorb it into all my cells. Does that make sense? You see the difference there? I have a door with 1,000 people trying to get out one door versus I have 1,000,000 doors and 1,000 people. It's a big difference. And that's the problem with fructose. So we look at certain fruits, we can see different levels of fructose in those fruits. You know, the apricots have only 0.7 fructose, even though the total sugars are pretty high. So if we were going to go off and cheat, you know, say, I need something more than just my berry, I'd rather you go cheat an apricot. Then on the apple above it was 7.6 in its fructose. You see that? So there's foods that we can say, hey, I can see why this food would have a bigger impact on my sugar levels, my internal sugar levels. And I know I talk about this, and I'm about to hit you with the big, why does sugar matter so much? I like kind of building up to that point, where right now you might think, well, why does sugar matter so much? We'll see in just a second. Go ahead and go to the next one now for me. So glycemic load. So glycemic load. Have you heard of glycemic index or glycemic load of foods before? Basically how much blood sugar is a result of eating that food. So the index is one thing and the load is another thing. They tend to be pretty closely represented. Index just means how much sugar in the food, and then load is how much does it actually increase your blood sugar. So if we look at this is the reason why we say berries are okay. Raisins, 64 on the index, 28 on the load. Dates, 42 in the index, 18 on the load. Banana, 62 in the index, 16 on the load. Grapes, 59.11. Raspberries, 33.3. Right? I mean, raspberries are going to have very little impact on blood sugar. So you should eat more berries from that standpoint alone. Not to mention the antioxidants that come in berries. And I know that's why you were mentioning raspberries earlier. If we start looking at antioxidants or what's cancer-fighting properties of foods, we want rich antioxidants, and berries have those. Look for the reddish, bluish-colored foods, and you're in a better place. So that's why we like. I like eggplant on this diet. I thought, hey, you should eat eggplant. Eat a lot of it, because that skin. Eat the skin is what I'm saying. That skin is an anthocyanin, which is the same antioxidant that's present in the berries. So we look for that coloration. Red cabbage. We go in that direction. Kale. I said I love kale, right? Red. You know the red kale? You ever see what I'm talking about? Where you look at it, it's green leaf, but the stalk is red. You think, oh, I can't eat that stalk. Buy a Vitamix. You sure can. Anybody can eat anything out of a Vitamix. You can actually eat my cell phone if you put it in a Vitamix. I don't recommend doing that, but you could. It's amazing. You can go in your backyard, you can chop, if you have a bunch of yard waste, you can chop your trees down in your Vitamix. It will take you all day, but it will do that. 2 horsepower. It's a 2 horsepower blender. Versus like the 3rd horsepower blenders out there that people pretend to have. 2. It rattles the whole house when you turn it high. It's awesome. All right, next slide for me, please. So this is where we get into understanding leptin. And this is the sugar. This is it. This is where we understand sugar. This is the big deal. So leptin is a hormone. L-E-P-T-I-N, leptin. The hormone, its job is to tell you you're satiated, so stop eating, and burn fat. The hypothalamus receives leptin. Leptin is excreted by fat cells as well as by organs. So the hypothalamus hears it, basically identifies how much leptin is present in the body, and then based on that tells the brain, hey, you don't need to eat. You can burn fat for energy. The problem is most people in our culture have some level of leptin resistance. It goes along with insulin resistance, and it is very, very, very common in our culture. Now, if you ask your medical doctor, hey, I want to test leptin, you better be ready to have a little battle. Because a lot of times medical doctors say, well, I don't know what that is. What is leptin? And if we test it, I don't know what, I can't tell you about it. I don't know what to tell you about it. I don't know what to prescribe you, because there is no prescription. So typically, they'll feel a little uncomfortable testing leptin. If you have a good relationship with the doctor, you can say, hey, you know what? I want my leptin tested. I don't expect you to tell me anything. I don't want you to know what it is. I just want to know what the number is for myself. And if it's over 6, then it's too high. I've tested leptin in many people, and I've seen it as high as 80, where 2 to 6 would be considered the best normal range that I can find in people. And below 2 is fine too, but that's the most common range for someone who's got a good leptin function. So what is leptin? So let's go ahead and hit the first, click it once here. So this is a cell. The cell here is the normal cell. We're going to talk about insulin and correlate that to leptin as we go. All those little lines around that cell are insulin receptor sites. Okay, so that's what we got there, our insulin receptor sites. Go ahead and click again. And what we see here is glucose, rising glucose in the body. So how do you rise glucose in the body? You eat. You ate something, anything, and blood sugar is going to go up. Well, if it's 100% pure fat, nothing but fat, blood sugar won't go up. But anything else, if there's any carbohydrate at all, there's a little increase in blood sugar. All right, so it's always going up. But let's say it's a banana sandwich. We've got 2 big, thick slices of bread and like 3 bananas laid in between them. And maple syrup?
Mayonnaise.
Mayonnaise, okay, I thought it was maple syrup. All right. Like maple syrup would really do it, man. But yeah, okay, so mayonnaise. Yes, we got some good stuff in there, right? Our blood sugar is going to go way, way up if we do that, right? And so then we hit the next slide here, click it again, and we'll see that what happens is we have a release of insulin. That's the response. So if we look at your blood sugar, and we just see it on a path here, you're feeling kind of, here it is, you're feeling kind of hungry, you eat that sandwich and it spikes way up, and it's up here, and then the insulin comes pouring out, and the insulin causes the blood sugar to go down. Go ahead and click the slide, because what the insulin does is it causes glucose to drive through. Those receptor sites, they receive the insulin, they open up windows for blood sugar, for glucose, to leave the bloodstream and go into the cell. And just like that, your blood sugar comes down and plummets nice and low, and then what do? You pass out at your desk. Okay? What was that? Okay. Oh, I'm hungry. So now you're hungry again, right? So then you eat again, and up goes the blood sugar, and then out comes the insulin, and down goes the blood sugar. And that's what happens. We tend to be these huge spikes and troughs, and spikes and troughs, and spikes and troughs. And we think that that's fine, because we go to the doctor, we get a blood test, and what does he do? He tests our blood sugar. But what does he call it? What kind of blood test? Fasting. Thank you. It's a fasting blood test. So I've taken out all of my bad habits here, and I've let my blood sugar just go flat and normal, and it's good. Your blood sugar is fantastic. Just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing. Famous last words. Yeah, and so what you're doing is you're doing this still. And you have to realize, though, next click for me, and then next click. So you use that sugar for energy, and then so what happens. Glucose goes down, but insulin doesn't. Insulin, sadly, it's like that fructose thing. It's only got one door, your liver. Insulin goes out the liver. It's so unfair. That is so unfair. Sugar can run into 75 trillion cells, but insulin's got to go through my liver? I mean, come on. God, if you would have just made insulin go out all of my cells, I could eat whatever, anytime, and no concern. Right? Like, that's the thing. We have a limitation to our ability to respond because insulin. So, if your doctor tested your insulin, he'd probably have a better idea as to where you really are than the fasting glucose test. But they don't do that. Not until they see or perceive a problem. Then we start to we get the A1C test, right? We start to do a different look. We say, ooh, we have some issues here. Okay, we got to do some things. We got to change. About form my glucophage. Let's go. So this is the issue, is that we just don't realize the path that we're on because we're not looking at it. We're not testing it. So when this continues to happen, next, quick for me, that high level of insulin causes an intelligent response in our body. And the intelligent response is, whoa, I am getting bombarded by this insulin stuff here. I can't have this. I can't have these receptor sites. These are your cells talking. We got to get rid of some receptor sites. We got to get rid of some of these receptors. There's just too much insulin. I mean, it's just bombarding us to get rid of receptor sites. So you downgrade reception of the insulin, which then leads to what that cell is, which is insulin resistant. Because you've been bombarded. Now it's just saying, God, I don't want to hear that anymore. And now you don't respond anymore. And you don't open the door up for the blood sugar to go to the cells. And now, sugar rises in the bloodstream, and you get that diabetic level. Or pre-diabetic level. Type 2 diabetes has been reversed many times, and I've seen it in my office dozens and dozens of times. Completely reversed type 2 diabetes. Is it easy? Whew, no way. It is not easy in any way, shape, or form. All it takes, though, is a decision to be committed. And then a reconfirmation of that decision every time you look at something rich in carbohydrates. It takes a while, but it works. It works. So let's keep going here. Let's see what else we got here. What else do I show? Oh, dis-ease. Yep, so that's at the dis-ease level, not quite disease yet. And then what we see the result of this last click shows us glucose and insulin now are both extremely elevated at that point in time. So we've gotten this disease. Well, leptin, that hormone leptin, it follows it. It mirrors it exactly the same. Because what will happen is you start pushing more leptin out into the body because of increasing fat storage. That's what happens when you put sugar in a cell. Increasing fat in the body, so those fat cells secrete leptin. So we have more leptin coming out. So if we push this again, push it a couple, you might have to push it twice to get all the L's up there. Or a couple times, one more. There we go, okay, cool. And you can see leptin is just kind of mirroring what we see with insulin. So your hypothalamus is now that cell. That's your hypothalamus. And those projections are leptin receptors. And here's leptin, it was doing great, and then leptin's bombarding it, and it's like, I don't know what to do with this, get rid of these receptor sites. And your hypothalamus ends up like that right-sided cell where there's very few sites for leptin to be heard. And so now you don't feel satiated, and you don't burn fat for energy. And I've had people who've just, said, I fasted for 3 days, and I didn't lose a pound. I understand. You're not alone. There are a lot of people who will do that. And it's because they are not leptin sensitive. You want to maintain leptin sensitivity for that reason of being a fat burner and maintaining weight. Leptin is also a master hormone. It is in charge of so many things. So your doctor, he might not be able to find a way to test leptin, and you can say, well, hey, check the fertility panel, see if it's there. 9 times out of 10, they'll be able to find it listed under fertility panel. Why? Because estrogen and progesterone levels, balancing of those two, is regulated by leptin. Ooh, interesting. Your T3 and T4 production from the thyroid based upon TSH is also regulated by leptin. Wow. I wonder how many thyroid problems exist out there that aren't really thyroid problems, that are leptin problems. So we've had, in my office over the years, I've probably had about 50 patients now, 50 women, who were told, I don't think you're ever going to be able to get pregnant. Who've gotten pregnant. About 8 of them now, entirely correlated with their leptin numbers. The others, other stuff, chiropractic. So, pretty exciting stuff, right? I mean, wow, I wish I understood this better. You can! All right, let's go to the next slide here. I'm almost done, actually. We're going to kind of close up with some of the rule discussion and kind of go from there. So inflammation, IF Tracker, you can actually get this as an app. inflammationfactor.com. You can go and you can look up the inflammation factor of foods. Now it's important to know that the inflammation factor for me, specifically, is going to be different than the inflammation factor for you. Specifically, everyone's going to have a different response. Thus, that's why some people have a full-on allergy, right? So if you have a peanut allergy, well then the inflammation from a peanut in your body is going to be more so than in mine. I don't have a peanut allergy, but what I do have, and I understand, is I have an inflammatory response to peanuts. But so do all of you. It's a highly inflammatory food. I've just come to really understand mine. So now I know exactly where mine is. Anyone love peanuts? I love peanuts. There it is. Yeah. I eat almond butter by the jar. Yesterday, actually, not even yesterday, last night, within about 15 minutes, I ate half a bottle of almond butter, half a jar. So I'm a fat consumer like crazy. Actually, I just posted a video today on Facebook of myself eating half of a, not stick, half of a chunk of Kerrygold butter. Does everyone know what Kerrygold butter is? Grass-fed pasture butter. Very healthy stuff for you. And meanwhile, I'm holding the front cover of June 2014 Time magazine that says "Eat Butter." I'm holding it up in this video of me, and I'm eating this like just a big chunk of it. And I'm making a point. And I've got pecans that I stuck in the top of it. And my point was, I'm breaking the myth. Fat doesn't make you fat. I've been eating a high-fat diet for 5 years. Last time I did the blood test, my HDLs and LDLs were 1-to-1 ratio. They were equal. So you know, don't tell me that fat makes you fat, or that fat increases your level of cholesterol. Fat doesn't do that. Sugar does that. So if I did all of that, and I had sugared it first, well, that would be very bad. Because the combination of the two, that combination is awful. So getting into eating healthy fast. Now if someone tried to do that, eat the half, it's not a stick, it's like 2 1/4 sticks, the Kerrygold package. So to eat half of that is quite a bit of butter, right? And it was kind of disgusting by the end of it. But it was okay. If you tried to do that, just out of the blue here, and you haven't been eating an increasing level of fat, you would have an awful, awful problem with that. Okay, so don't go doing that. Your stomach will hurt you. You'll probably have a bathroom issue. I mean, there's going to be lots of problems. So that's the product of 5 years of eating a significant amount of fat on a regular basis. So, all right. So inflammation factor. These are some pretty random kind of looking things here. So a negative number on the IF tracker, you see the bread, pita, white bread there, negative 62. Negative is inflammatory, and positive is anti-inflammatory, and it's affecting the body. So a goal that I have for some people then is to kind of get a sense of where they are and try to move to the place where you're averaging like a 0 for the day at least. 0 or positive. So I love almonds, as I said. Raw are going to have a greater anti-inflammatory rating than a cooked or roasted almond, because of what happens to fat when you heat it. So if I heat fat, I'm going to create some rancidity, I'm going to change the chemical composition of it, and now the benefit is going to become less. So we prefer to eat our nuts as raw nuts. That makes more sense. So we get down, we see some of the other ones here. Flax seeds, whole, 1/4 cup, 39, so that's pretty good, anti-inflammatory. And garlic, 215, that is pretty anti-inflammatory. Now a tablespoon of garlic, that's a lot of garlic. Don't expect to kiss spouse at night. Yes. You can. You can ask a question. We're in it, we'll explain it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The more we roast, the less the impact of the anti-inflammatory benefit, the less the impact of the positive cardiovascular benefit of garlic. But still, there is a positive impact. So you're going to hear me say this with all vegetables, all foods that are grown from the ground, that you're going to be better off in a raw state over cooked with everything. Does that mean that you don't eat anything cooked? No. So garlic, roasted, okay. Just make sure you're eating some other things that are raw, too. Okay? See, I'm saying, I'm not going to say, oh, you can never cook a roasted garlic clove again. No, that's not it. That's not it at all. So it's an interesting thing because honestly, it comes down. We really should have a graph for every single food, because every food is going to be a time and temperature graph, and then we can see that diminishing return over time and temperature. So it's really, it all comes down to time and temperature. It's kind of like cooking with oils. You know, you should cook with oils that are highly resistant to heat. Coconut oil is the best oil to cook with, sauteing. Palm oil is good for baking purposes. Olive oil is kind of next down the list. But olive oil at high heat, you start to really change it pretty fast. It happens quick. Coconut oil is very resistant, though it has a very low smoking point, though. So coconut oil is going to smoke, and you're going to think you're burning it up, but that's the smoking point. So it's hard to kind of manage all of that understanding, hence 60 days. But we can definitely get you started in this path without ever being part of the 60-day turnaround. Now we'll take one more question now, and we'll hold it
What
today.
about canola oil?
Yeah, so canola oil, I'm a thumbs down on.
Okay.
Because of the processing that goes into canola oil. So canola comes from a rapeseed plant, and it's named canola because it's named Canadian oil. That's what canola means. Is that pretty exciting? Canadian oil. Wow, what's that all about? Yeah, so this manufacturing company figures out how to take this oil and alter its chemical composition in a way that makes it have this great viscosity rating, so it was used as a lubrication for industrial equipment.
Right.
That was the start. And then they realized, well, hey, it doesn't have, the fat's a non-saturated fat that has a pretty good shelf life. All right, let's sell it as healthy. So I'm not a fan of canola. And I think we're going to see over time it's going to, more people are going to start to realize, like, oh, that's not really what we should do. So, all right, next. Quick. Oh, maple syrup. Notice how negative 56 in the maple syrup. You can stay there, you're fine. Sugar. Sugar is inflammatory. So, do I eat maple syrup? Well, when I'm not on the 60-day diet, which I call the straight 60, if I'm not on my straight 60, yes, I do. I'll eat it, just not much of it. I look at it for what it is. And if I eat maple syrup, should I eat it on pancakes? Well, I really shouldn't do that. I know, you're like, what? I don't like you! Why are you talking? Be quiet, please.
Anti-American.
Yeah, I know, isn't that so anti-American? No, she's right though, right? I mean, look at the problem with America. Obviously, what I'm saying is anti-American. When you think about it. So this is a list of highly anti-inflammatory foods. So these are good ones. So nutrient density and anti-inflammatory are two separate things, aren't they? Remember, kale's at the very top of the list with collards for nutrient density, but they're not.